what Deborah wrote is about the wedding of Jesus Christ and his bride, which is us, the church. Now, I had a wedding last Sunday night. On Saturday night, we had a rehearsal. And after I got home from the rehearsal, I thought, well, I wonder, is this formal or informal? I really thought it's probably formal, but I better be sure. So I texted Jacob to find out if I was supposed to wear a suit and tie, and he texted me back and said, "Suit and tie, please." So I might have been kicked out of the wedding if I'd appeared in just casual clothes, you know? And we don't want that to happen. Using a parable, Jesus tells about the importance of being dressed properly for Christ's wedding, which we've all been invited to attend. Now, Matthew 22, beginning with verse 2, Jesus tells this parable, which is about him and his Father and about his bride. Jesus said in verse 2, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son." Now, folks, the king represents God, and the son represents Jesus Christ. And for a person to be a part of this celebration, they must be true believers of Jesus Christ. Our invitation to the wedding banquet is an invitation to salvation, and not just that, but to all the other blessings that we receive from being the bride of Christ, being the church. And folks, we don't want to miss that. No one wants to miss that, because the alternative is a terrible, terrible eternity for those who miss out. Jesus continues in verses 3 through 5. He invites people to the celebration. He sent out his slaves. The king sent out his slaves to summon those invited to the banquet, but they didn't want to come. Again, he sent out other slaves, and he said, "Tell those who are invited, look, I've prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet." But they paid no attention and went away, one to his farm and one to his business. Now I want you to notice in verse 3 that the king said, "Summon those invited to the banquet." That implies that they knew about this wedding banquet. They had previously been invited, so they should have been ready to attend when the call came out. But they refused. They refused to come to the wedding banquet for the king's son. And again, the king sent out other slaves to tell them that the feast had been prepared, but they too refused to attend. Why? Because they had other things to do. They had other priorities. One went to his farm, another to his business. They had no excuse for refusing because they knew that this was coming up. But they were so involved in their own interests and in materialism that they just ignored the invitation. God had previously invited many to join in the celebration of the wedding of his son, and that includes the fellowship of worship and service to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now we all know that there are people who walk the aisles of the church and they accept the King's invitation. And they vow to put His interests first in their lives. But then something happens. Their own interests interrupt their worship and their service to the Lord. And they fall away. We have seen it too many times in our churches down through the centuries. William Barclay wrote this in his daily study Bible on Matthew. It is very easy for a man to be so busy with the things of time that he forgets the things of eternity. My friends, it is a privilege for us to come to Christ. It is a privilege for us to read His Word and to pray to Him and to worship Him in God's house. It is our highest privilege to serve Christ, a privilege that we should not take lightly, but so many do. Those who refused His invitation to the wedding banquet totally ignored His blessings. But in verse 6, it gets worse. Jesus continues, others seized His slaves, beat them, and killed them. Folks, this king was not a threat to those he'd invited. He only wanted to bless them. He wanted them to be a part of this banquet. But some of those who rejected the king's invitation became angry. And in their anger, they killed the slaves. I don't know whether you have experienced this or not, but there are those who sometimes get upset when they're reminded that they're on the wrong road in life. And it results in their anger toward those who only want to help them know how to get on the right road and live a blessed life for God. Jesus warned us about this in John 15. He said, if the world hates you, remember, it hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it. But you're no longer a part of the world. Do you remember what I told you? A slave is not greater than the master. Since they persecuted me, naturally they will persecute you. And if they had listened to me, they would listen to you. They will do all this to you because of me, for they have rejected the one who sent me. They would not be guilty if I had not come and spoken to them. But now they have no excuse for their sins. The killing of his slaves really angered this king. And in verse 7, we read, the king was furious, and he sent out his army to destroy the murderers and burn their town. The king because of their evil response to his goodness, the king sent his army as judgment on the rebellious wedding guests. And folks, that is a judgment. That is a symbol of God's judgment on those who reject His covenant relationship. They will experience eternal separation from God. But this king had not given up. So he invited some others to his banquet. Verses 8 through the first part of verse 10. Then the king told his slaves, "The banquet is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore, go to where the roads exit the city and invite everyone you find to the banquet." So the slaves went out to the roads, and they gathered everyone they found, both evil and good. Those originally invited had betrayed the king and his son, so they didn't deserve any longer to be invited to the banquet. But the new guests, both evil and good, would be honored with an invitation. Now that may shock us, but God has always accepted the worst of sinners. Read through the Bible, and you will see that. The first person that comes to my mind is Paul, who persecuted Christians until he met Jesus one day. And there are others who have rebelled against God, but they came to their spiritual senses and came to Him. God accepts sinners. He accepts sinners who are willing to accept His grace by faith, and He is willing to transform them and welcome them into His kingdom. The rest of verse 10 and verse 11, we read that the wedding banquet was filled with guests. But when the king came in to view the guests, he saw a man there who was not dressed in wedding clothes. All the guests were to be properly clothed, but he wasn't. Folks, in that day and time, it was custom for a king to supply all of the invited guests with robes to wear at a banquet. And evidently, this man refused the provision of the king and wore his everyday clothes. His attitude may have been, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Or it could have been, if the king wants me at the feast, then he will have to take me just the way I am. Boy, have I been there. And maybe you have too. Regardless of what the man thought, his attitude was one of self-will and ignoring the king's undeserved favor, which is His amazing grace. We're told very clearly in 2 Corinthians 5:17, anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone. A new life has begun. Folks, we can come to Christ just as we are, but we cannot remain the way that we were. Experiencing God's blessings of salvation and relationship with Him requires that we be transformed, that we be changed. Again, the old is gone, the new has come. This man wasn't transformed. He was still disobedient to the king. Verse 12. The king said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes?" And the man was speechless. The wedding clothes symbolize the righteousness that is needed to enter God's kingdom. Christ has provided clothes of righteousness for everyone But each person must choose to put them on if they want to enter the king's banquet, which is a symbol of eternal life. When the king confronted the man, he was speechless. He had no excuse for his deliberate act of self-will. Oh, he could have pleaded lack of time, but others found time. Or he couldn't plead lack of time because others found time. He couldn't plead ignorance because others knew where to get the king's provision. And he couldn't plead poverty because the king provided out of his own riches. The man couldn't answer the king. His crime was that the sin of total disregard for the king and for his son. And we see it every day, don't we? In verse 13, we see God's punishment for those who refuse His salvation. Then the king told the attendants, "Tie him up, hand and foot, throw him into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Because the man was not a true believer, he wasn't allowed to attend the wedding banquet of the Son of God and His bride, the body of Christ, the church. His punishment was weeping and gnashing of teeth. And those are symbols of extreme pain and sorrow, which is called hell. And it is real because Jesus talks about it here in His Word. Hell is real. And we don't want to go there. Nobody should want to go there. Because there's a much better place to go to. Then we come to verse 14. And here Jesus gives us a serious and sad closing statement. For many are called, but few are chosen. Now, whether we accept the wedding garment is up to us, but Christ has provided it. He has provided it for us. The invitation goes out to everyone. Folks, we have to come to God on His terms. The basic lesson of this parable is that the King, God, issues an undeserved invitation to all people. And we have a choice. We can choose the righteousness of Christ, which comes by grace through faith, or we can refuse it. Christ calls everyone to faith in Him. A faith that relies on Him and honors Him, not just when it's convenient, but all the time, but at all times. God's invitation of grace, forgiveness, and the blessing of an eternal and meaningful life is open as long as we're alive. If you have not accepted God's invitation to be dressed properly, to be righteous, you need to do that right now. You need to do that as we sing this closing hymn. Because we don't know when Jesus' wedding banquet is going to be ready for us. He's preparing it. The invitation is out there. But are we ready? If we're not, life is a sad and very, very tough eternity.